Good Friday morning, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Don,
And I'm Jonathan.
and today we are talking about I believe it's 2003
Yeah.
film directed by Danny Boyle, who you may know from such stellar films as Trainspotting and Slither. Uh,
Slumdog Millionaire, and yeah.
Slumdog Millionaire, yeah. It's called 28 Days Later. Now
Yeah.
we I don't know, we'll decide towards the end of the video if we're going to watch the next in the series. We're kind of building towards seeing 28 Years Later, which is in theaters right now. So,
Yeah.
um the film stars Cillian Murphy in one of his very early roles. You might know him as he was
Oppenheimer. Ted Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer. That's yeah, he was
Got
Oppenheimer
an Oscar
very
for it.
recently. He was in Red Eye as well.
Yeah.
And Brennan Gleeson, who was well, he's been in a lot of films. You recognize his face. You would
Yes.
know him. Among other folks, it is I think it's a completely British cast.
Yeah. And it actually is one of the most well um, performing movies of the recent like 25 years. They only spent $8 million on it and made over $100 million. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's so for those who are, interested, just a little background or a little, synopsis. I'm not sure we could call it necessarily a zombie film, although I think a lot of people would throw it into that
Yeah,
genre.
the creators don't like referring they like referred to it as an infected movie.
Yeah, they don't call them zombies, they're infected, and it's the rage virus.
Yeah.
So it is a virus that we're not really sure, I mean, according to the film, whether it originated in chimpanzees or this was a scientific
It, it,
experiment with
it,
chimpanzees.
I took it to mean that they created it in the lab, like they were
Yeah,
messing around and they created something in the lab. Yeah.
yeah, that's what it seems like. You're right. But Escape from the Lab,
Yeah.
that sounds vaguely familiar. Uh,
Yes.
anyway, and it turns people into violent, raging monsters,
Yeah.
basically. Um,
That's
and
I think that's the piece that why they push back against the zombies because they don't die. They're not dead. They're just um
Yeah, and unlike zombies, I mean, generally, in zombie canon, if you
yeah,
will, you gotta destroy the brain,
yeah,
shoot them in the head or whatever. These just die when they're shot,
yeah,
like any human would. They're
yeah,
just really angry and fast and
yeah.
very infectious. Um, Now, I think one of the things I want to say before we get into a lot of the themes and stuff here is that what this film does well. Um, and I think what any good horror film does well is really disregard the big bad so much as play the themes.
Yes.
You know what I mean? In that, like, there's plenty. If you like horror movies, you like particularly gore and splatter movies.
Sure.
There's plenty of that for you out there,
Yeah.
but there's not a whole lot of them that do themes and ideas really well. Some of them are
Yeah.
just gratuitous, I think is the
Yeah.
best word.
Yeah.
This one is not.
Yeah.
It really
I
does play the themes well.
yeah,
And so let's
and
talk about those.
yeah, I don't remember where I read it or saw it, but it was a while ago. But someone mentioned that in art, usually horror stories and movies are created to talk about a deeper fear of the human experience or
Right.
something that's going on in the world. A really good example is one of the first actual zombie movies, George Romero's Night of the Living
The
Dead
Living Dead.
was created in the 60s. It is clearly about uh, paranoia people in the United States had toward communists and the idea of the communist takeover. I mean,
Mhm.
it's clearly that. And then when he remade the movie in the 90s, he literally sets his movie in a mall to to talk about clearly capitalism and kind of being
Consumerism, yeah.
consumerism and all that stuff, right? So, yeah, I mean, to me, I thought kind of one of the interesting themes that really jumped out for me is um, survival at what cost?
Yeah.
and that was a big theme. You have Selena, who is the primary female and protagonist in the movie.
Hmm.
There's a scene where someone that she has very early, when Jim, the main character, meets her and this other guy, Mark. They have clearly survived the month together. Like they clearly weren't connected before, but they have spent several weeks together, kind of surviving.
Hmm.
And the second he becomes possibly infected. We don't even know if he really is infected, but just a possibility. We see her. We don't see it. It's behind a cabinet, so we don't
It's
see really
obscured.
any.
Yeah.
It's obscured, but she basically just kills him, like instantly kills him,
Yeah.
like and brutally kills him.
Yeah.
And
And she says to Jim, and you get infected, I'll do the same to you in a heartbeat.
yeah, and she even says the best you can hope, the best we have left is to survive.
Yeah.
And that leads into later in the movie when they come across and they find their way to basically an army outpost, basically. And the OC, I can't remember, Major West,
Henry West. Yeah.
Henry West, talks about, I've got to give these 9 soldiers of mine reason to exist. They want women. There's 2 women here. You can't leave because the women are now ours. Basically, they're going to be used in his mind. They're going to be used for sex slaves, as sex slaves. And again, it's like this idea of, okay, maybe we should talk about that. There's certain levels of survival that really aren't worth surviving. Like
Yeah.
there is, I don't know. To me, there's this idea of there's a point at which you cross over a Rubicon of stopping being human, and maybe that's not worth just surviving if you have to literally shed all your morality and all your compassion to survive.
Yeah, and I mean, you see that in Jim's parents when they get to Jim's house, and his parents have just they drank a bottle of liquor and took sleeping pills and
Yep.
you
Yep.
know gave up.
Yep.
Like, is it worth surviving? And again, this I think is what this film does well is social
Yeah.
commentary, right? On what is it, how do whatever the big bad is,
Yeah.
right? How do people cope with it? How do people survive it? What does it make them do? Um,
I was gonna ask you if we assume that Boyle and Garland, who wrote the film, are attempting to make a social commentary, which I really think they are. What do you think they're wanting us to explore with this? What question do you think they're putting in front of us? Do you have a sense?
yeah, well, I think it's the same question you would find in a lot of shows and films like this. The
Yeah.
Walking Dead did this really well. Robert Kirkman wrote
Yeah.
the comic book, The Walking Dead, and at the end of I may have mentioned this before, the end of the very first comic book.
Yeah.
The main character, Rick, says, "Don't you get it? We're the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Not the zombies, not the infection. It's
Yeah.
us because of what we'll do to each other." And I think, you asked that question. I think that's the what they're exploring is what are the depths that human beings will go to in order to survive,
I was also
in
I was
order to
also yeah,
thrive in
I
in
was
that.
also I was also wondering, it was written around a time where we were kind of learning that the story that we had been sold about Iraq having WMDs and being a threat
Hmm.
to, the Middle East, in terms of nuclear war, that was becoming to be revealed to not be true. If you remember, Blair, who was the prime minister of the UK at the time, was in lockstep with Bush. In this movie, the military is shown to be just inept and completely just unable to really do what they're supposed to be doing. And it made me wonder if they were also trying to make a commentary about the fact we had trusted authority when authority had let us down and authority wasn't competent. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. that's an interesting thought. When it comes to this, I hadn't thought of that.
Um, I do like too that this movie continues to remind us that I really think this is true. Human beings will continually try to create connection, even in chaotic situations.
Right.
And what's
Right.
interesting is I also think we try to create normalcy, even when it's chaotic and makes no sense. Like,
Hmm.
when they run into Frank and Hannah. Frank is the father, Hannah is the young daughter.
Right.
They're clearly celebrating Christmas, and you're just like, why on earth are you celebrating Christmas? But they're celebrating Christmas because they want normalcy. They want,
Right.
even in the midst of this horrible situation where everything is falling apart, we we are desperate for connection and we're desperate for normalcy. We
Yeah.
just are. And
Yeah,
I,
well, isn't that the scene where I think it's Frank says something like and when it comes to his daughter, he says, "I don't want her to cope.
yeah,
I don't want just survival. I want her
yeah,
to
yeah,
be normal again." And
yeah,
and what was the reply was like, "This is normal now."
yes, yeah,
So,
yeah. I just again, I also thought a fascinating dynamic of this, and it's actually, from what I understand, I haven't seen the third movie, but they kind of have retconned the second, so they've kind of skipped over the second.
yes, that's
That
what I
makes
heard as
some
well.
sense because Boyle and Garland, uh, I think Boyle was an executive producer on the second movie, but he didn't direct it. Garland didn't write it, and so it makes sense they're kind of just jumping over. But
Well, from having seen the second film,
yeah,
I can tell you that the second film comes off as more of an action adventure type of
yeah,
film
yeah,
than more of a social commentary horror type of film. So,
yeah.
if that's what we end up looking at, you'll see that.
Yeah. Um, but I've heard in the third movie, and it's clear here, there's this sense that the rest of the world has just gone, okay, we're just going to isolate the UK and let that be their problem, and we're going to continue on with our lives. Because
Yeah.
you see in the movie, you see this horrible scene that Jim goes through, this horrible trauma. He's laying on the ground. He's just escaped almost being executed, and you see a plane fly overhead, and
Yeah.
you're like, wait, everybody else is just going on with their lives, and even I didn't even notice it till this time. I've seen this movie, I think, just one time before, but there's this beautiful scene where the sergeant who is fighting against the army wants to take these two women, take them into make them sex slaves. This sergeant is clearly like, no, this is wrong. We can't do this. And so he's been put into the barracks with Jim, and he's talking about The Simpsons and this joke he used to love on The Simpsons, and he's saying about somewhere, just over the ocean here, somebody's watching The Simpsons right now, and it's just like, I think that's, to me, a powerful part of this movie is the reflection on the fact that in one part of the world there can be this disaster, this huge humanitarian crisis, and the rest of us just live oblivious and we don't even think about it. Like,
Yeah.
you think about Somalia, you think about Rwanda, you think about, like, even right now with Gaza, we have a tendency to, there's like this horrible thing, but we're going to bracket it off over here, and
Well,
we're
I
just going
mean,
to do our lives.
you don't even have to leave the U.S. for that. I mean, just what
Yeah,
happened in Texas last week, this
yeah,
past week.
yeah,
Um, and how many of us said, well, yeah, that's terrible, but
yeah,
I'm not in Texas.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting because, and I recall this from the film, at the end of the second film, there it's almost a like just an add-on at the end
Mm.
where you see the rage zombies, the rage monsters at the Eiffel Tower. Like,
Oh, yeah,
oh, it's in France now,
yeah,
which I think is why they retconned it out.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
no, I definitely think that's true because I think, I could be wrong, obviously, but I think the two of them, Boyle and Garland, like to explore. One of the things they want us to explore is how often we bracket off horrible things as like that's someone else's problem.
yeah.
That's not our problem. That's their problem. And
In secular society,
Yeah,
that's easy to do, right?
yeah.
We do it all the time, but as Christians,
We're
we're
not
called to
supposed to.
something higher than that, right? Hopefully.
Well, hopefully, that's a big hopeful. But yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, I mean that's what I think is so scary about reflecting on this stuff is if you're honest with yourself, you could see if there was a horrible disaster that happened in the UK, you could see a lot of countries being like, well, we'll just isolate it to the UK and hopefully they'll figure it out. You know?
oh well.
And I don't know, to me, that's also a statement about losing our humanity, about that we're,
Yeah, for sure.
again, the people off outside of the UK are choosing to survive at the cost of caring about these other people. You
Hmm.
know, we're gonna cut our compassion off so that we can survive and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What else do we want to look at here? A lot of this, and I mean, I think this happens with, again, good films, good horror films that do a little social commentary is, about our loss of humanity, our loss of um dignity and respect for one another. There's another film that comes to mind, and maybe we'll take a look at it somewhere down the line, which is an adaptation of Stephen King's short story, The Mist,
Yeah.
which does the same sort of thing in a completely different way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what
What
else
did
did you want to talk about here, John?
what did you think about the Christian and religious themes? Like that,
Mm,
I completely forgot about it till I watched it again. But there's the scene leading up to Jim finding his parents, and they spend about 5 minutes walking and going through dangerous situations, and the entire time, very small voice, a single person, is singing, "Lord, abide with me." you know, abide.
mhm.
That's a pretty well-known hymn, but they're just in this very haunting voice. I mean, it's not a choir. It's not. It's almost like it's an inner kind of thought of one of the characters. There's just like this abide with me. It's kind of even get ghostly kind of performed. But what did you think?
Like a prayer, right?
Yeah, what did you think about that? What did you think about the fact that one of the first scenes is Jim comes to a church and he kind of expects that that'll be a safe place, and it turns into a place that literally the priest is coming after him, right? It made me wonder if there was a commentary there about the sex scandal. Like, this is like, you know, you know, but
That seemed like a little bit of a reach to me. I think it might just be more of a commentary on the church in general.
yeah,
Um,
so let's talk about that. What about church? Why do you think they chose to? They could have played any music while that scene was going on. Why abide with me? And then why have the church be a dangerous place, not a place where he could hide? But
well, I think as far as the church goes, I think that is if if that's a commentary. Again, don't know,
yeah,
right? But if that is a commentary, I my guess would be that, that what he's saying is that even the church is not a safe place
yeah,
even today, right? Which, well, geez, we know. I mean, we have, in the UMC, we have safe sanctuaries policies to protect vulnerable people in our congregations,
yeah,
and still things happen.
yeah,
So, if I don't know if it's deeper than that. Maybe the song I think is interesting because we're not really given any indication of whether Jim is a religious person or
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And yet the song kind of comes off as like an internal prayer.
yeah,
And, is he praying
yeah,
this time? And, is our Boyle and what's the author's the writer's name?
Um,
Garland, Boyle and Garland. Are they saying that, even in the worst of times that you can depend on God, you can pray to God?
yeah,
That again, I think that might be a stretch for us to
yeah,
say that they're saying that because I don't know that they're necessarily religious
sure.
people. I'd like to say that.
Yeah. Well, I to me, I think I think there is something eternal in internal in human beings that we tend to believe there's something bigger than us,
Mhm.
and we tend to want to believe that thing that's bigger than us cares about us. And to me, I think that's the best thing sometimes the church can do is to point at this idea that this thing in front of you, it's not the last thing that will happen to you, and it's not the biggest thing that will ever happen to you. There's going to be a point in which you encounter God's love and God's grace even beyond this horrible thing you're facing. And to me, the Abide with Me was kind of a reminder in a weird way, for me at least, that can happen. That so even in the midst of this horrible situation, there can be a reminder that this last thing isn't the worst thing. Or the worst thing that's in front of us, sorry, the worst thing that's in front of us isn't the last thing that's going to happen to us.
One of our colleagues, one of our Methodist colleagues, Adam Hamilton says that,
Yeah.
that death doesn't get the final say.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, one of the great gifts of our calling to be pastors is that one of our jobs is to pump hope into the room. Like help,
A nice way of putting it.
like help. I guess actually I wouldn't even, because I don't want to make it seem like I bring the hope, but it's like we get the opportunity to point out the hope in the room. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah,
And
okay.
or to open up the windows so that the Holy Spirit can bring the hope into the room. But
Okay.
to me, the church is that's one of the great gifts of the church when we do it well is we're supposed to uplift people. We're supposed to say this horrible thing is wrong. This horrible thing shouldn't be happening, and we're going to hold your hand through it, and we're going to work to overcome it with you. But no matter what happens, God loves you, and that's not going to change.
Yeah. 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 But I still like your original wording there to pump hope into the room. Huh?
I'll go with that. I'll say Don likes it, so we'll go with it.
I'm gonna keep that.
Yeah. Um, I to me, I feel like one of the things I try to do in these kind of movies is look at for the moments of hope
Yeah.
because they help. Because I think we all need to work that muscle, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
I think
Oh yeah.
the worst thing that any human being can ever experience is hopelessness. To believe
Yeah.
that
I agree.
this thing that I'm encountering, this thing I'm facing, I can't overcome it, or there's no way to overcome it.
There's no other side to it. Yeah.
There's no other side. And
Yeah.
to me, that's the saddest encounter with people I've ever had is the people that I really truly feel, man, they don't have any hope.
Yeah.
And and so to me, one of the great things that I get to do, one of the great things you get to do, I guess on some level, one of the great things any Christian gets to do is we get to remind people, no, 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 there's hope. There's hope. Um,
And the writer director here gave us hope at the end, even
yeah,
though it was a very bleak situation, right? And you see the countryside is empty and the people are gone, and yet the three survivors are, there's that glimmer of hope at the end,
yeah,
that they're going to get rescued off the island,
yes,
which
absolutely.
sounds like a whole different movie, but um yeah, and again, I think, particularly we were talking about that theme of hope. Um, I think that's what the best horror movies hold on to,
Yeah.
right? Is that the ones that the kind of horror movies that I despise are the ones that are that completely hopeless. I hate when the bad guy wins, you know? I can't take it, you know?
Well, yeah. Another thing that I liked about this movie is a reminder that it's important in the chaos of life, even in really bad situations, to find the joy. So, when they get to the market and there's just food galore, they have fun running around picking all their favorite items out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like they're in the midst of a situation that I would never want to have to face, and yet in the midst of
Mhm.
it, they're having fun. They're
Yeah.
fun, they have that moment where they go through the tunnel and it's scary and it's dreadful, but they basically get to ride over other cars that have been crashed, and they're basically shouting like they're going on a roller coaster, but
Hmm.
that idea of um, recognizing that even in the midst of horrible situations, it's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
Or even in the midst of horrible situations, it's okay to find a moment of joy or to celebrate the fact that you get to have a hug from a good friend, or you fall in love like the two characters here. They're clearly falling in love. That can happen even in the midst of um, tragedy. I think is important. It's important for human beings to be willing to capture those moments and not feel bad about them, because I do think that's how you infuse hope into
Only
situations.
because there's okay, Selena, the
Yeah,
primary female
yeah,
protagonist here, um, she almost, at least in the beginning of the film, exemplifies that hopelessness, like we're
yeah,
just going to survive.
yeah,
And yet, towards the end, when they're Selena and Hannah are being held by the soldiers,
yeah.
and then the zombie, the rage
The
virus
infected, yeah, infected one.
infected
Yeah,
get in, and Jim comes in to save them. Now Jim is like covered in blood,
yeah,
so realistically he could be one of the infected at this point. And and Selena hesitates and does not, you could see there's that glimmer of hope right
yeah,
there. She hesitates a moment,
yeah,
and he says that was more than a heartbeat.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean that's a perfect example of that right in this film.
yeah,
You know. All right, well we're getting a little short on time.
yeah.
Um Anything else we want to say about this? I do want to say I like this film.
Yes, I do too.
It is it's very gritty.
Yeah,
Okay. Like the filming style, it's obviously a low budget film,
yes,
right?
yeah,
The filming style is very gritty, a lot of shaky cam, stuff like that,
yeah.
that, might not play well for some folks.
Mhm.
Understandable. Again, it's a horror movie. Understandable. It's rated R for a good reason. Not just the horror, but I think the themes as well. Um, but I like this film because it says something,
Yeah.
you know.
And
Um,
I think it again. I think these movies. I think it actually is helpful to when you watch a horror movie or a thriller, to go like, what's the big question about humanity that this author or this director is trying to get me to struggle with?
yeah, yeah, indeed. So, for next week, do you want to go to
Why don't we?
28 weeks later?
I was thinking we should try to do season 4 or season 5. Yeah, season
Five.
5. We should try to do season 5 of The Chosen, but I think
Uh-huh.
we should watch the second film and then the third film and then do them as well, because I really do think we'll get some interesting conversations out of it.
Okay, good. Well, maybe we can record a couple of things back to back in the
Yeah,
next couple of weeks because I'm on vacation the first week of August. So,
yeah. And I'm
so we'll
on
still have
vacation
something to
second.
to
So maybe,
publish. I mean, unless people want to see me blather on from Tennessee for no reason, you know.
who wouldn't want that? Come on, Don.
I don't know. My folks in my churches aren't.
I do want to say I hope that Garland and Boyle got a check from The Walking Dead because they lifted the first 30 minutes of The Walking Dead straight from this film.
They really did. Yeah. Well, you've obviously seen The Walking Dead, and Rick just wandering around in empty streets. I'm like, wait a minute, I've seen this before.
Literally waking up in a hospital bed. Like, come on, like this is like
Same story.
you stole this.
Uh, the only difference is, and this is for all the Walking Dead fans, the big difference is that The Walking Dead was a TV series based on the comic book, but when they strayed too far away from the comic book storyline, they really lost the plot in the TV series.
Hmm.
The comic book storyline to this day, Rick is still alive,
Yeah,
and still leading the same group.
yeah,
Um, they didn't do that in the series. And so's Carl. They wrote Carl off when he went to college.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Coral.
Yeah.
Probably
So,
seen all the same stuff I have about it. Uh,
so
anyway,
hopefully they got some residuals. That's all I hope.
let's, I guess. So then next week we'll talk about season 5 of The Chosen.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're going to try and watch the other two films, and we'll line those up for the coming weeks. So, all right. Um, Other than that, decent film, folks. If you like horrors with a little social commentary,
Yeah,
um,
there's a lot of violence, there's some nudity, so it's not a movie set down with your kids without some awareness of that. So
yeah, yeah, without like, don't put it on for your kids and leave the room.
yeah, no, don't do
Like my son watched it with me, but he's like, Dad, what's it? I can explain that. You know what I mean? Like I'm there to debrief it. So, all right, folks. Until next week, keep on finding God in the dark. We will see you all again next Friday. Take care and God bless. Friends, thank you again for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast. If you're finding these discussions helpful or meaningful in your Christian walk, then we'd invite you to go ahead and subscribe down below. Get more of this content. We publish every Friday morning at 10 a.m. And we're so glad that you can be with us and enjoy these discussions as well. Take care and God bless. Bye now.